Well, we are very excited to have Dr. Jody Gangloff-Kaufmann here today to talk about cicada killers and cicada killer wasps. Jody is an associate director at Cornell IPM and also the community and urban IPM coordinator. So go ahead, Jody.
Well, thank you. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I am very happy to talk about cicadas and cicada killer wasps, two of my favorite insect types, two of the biggest insects that we have. And so let's get into it. First of all, what are cicadas? I've heard people call cicadas locusts. That's not really accurate. Locusts are grasshoppers. But cicadas are, according to Cicada Mania, one of the most amazing insects in the world. And I would have to agree. They are true bugs in the order Hemiptera, and they're in the family Cicadidae, which makes sense. But they're related to leafhoppers and aphids and stink bugs, and they have the piercing, sucking mouth parts of a lot of other plant-feeding insects. There are over 3,000 species worldwide, and they come in all different colors and sizes. And really, they're found all over the world wherever we find deciduous trees, and that can be up into sort of northern Canada, but they are more common and more diverse in the tropics. Okay, so if you didn't know, male cicadas are responsible for all that noise. Male cicadas are the ones who sing. They sing for a few reasons. Most have exceptionally loud calls, which, can drive people crazy. But the call is produced by this organ or this structure called a timbal. It's a corrugated exoskeleton part, basically, that has a very strong muscle on the inside. And when the muscle is tightened, the timbal becomes concave and then it becomes convex, kind of like if you were to press on a water bottle, each time you press, it makes a click. So the timbal clicks very fast and makes a sound that's like, right? So cicadas have different calls, like a distress call. If you see a cicada being chased by a bird, it's going to have a very obvious distress call. They have territorial calls. They have courting calls, so they're trying to attract females. And sometimes in the early season, you can hear them synchronize their calls together. The males get together trying to lure in the ladies. So that is what's really interesting about cicadas. Like most other insects, the adults mate once they have emerged, and females lay their eggs in the newest growth of deciduous trees. So that is the youngest branches at the tips. And what you see in the picture here is what we call flagging, because when the female inserts the egg or many eggs, it can damage the branch and cause the tip to fall off. And it's not really a problem. For most trees, they have preferences like oak, maple, hickory, fruit trees, ash, birch, dogwood, and willows. But if you are somebody with an orchard, you may find this to be problematic if you have a large, season of cicadas. Most of the trees can tolerate this. Now, their development is so interesting. I think cicadas are considered the longest living insects in the world. The eggs from those tip branches hatch, and the first instar nymphs fall to the ground. They go under the ground, they burrow under, and they can live underground for 2 to as many as 17 years. And they feed on the xylem in those tree roots. Now, it's as opposed to the phloem, which is the sweet sap that plants produce. These guys are feeding on a relatively nutrient poor liquid inside of plants. They will emerge after their few years of living underground when the soil deep down 12 inches is 64 degrees. It's a very specific number. And you can see that this year we're probably a little delayed because it's been a cool spring, but we'll start to see them soon. The adults also feed from the xylem of plants, but it's only as needed because they don't generally feed and they don't live a long time. This shell that you see is the cicada nymph exoskeleton. So the adult will emerge from a split in the back of that exoskeleton, and then you might find those around the yard. You'll know that the cicadas have emerged. Now, there are different types of cicadas here in the Northeast or here in the Eastern United States. We have annual cicadas and we have periodical ones. Nearly all cicadas worldwide are considered annual. Annual cicadas, unlike the name, have more than a 1-year life cycle. They can have a 2 to 10-year life cycle. And some of each species emerge each year, which means that's what makes them annual. You'll find the same species every year. Now, periodical cicadas emerge in what we call broods, typically on a cycle of prime number years, which makes them completely fascinating. The purpose of a mass emergence is to thwart predators by saturating the environment with your offspring to ensure that some survive. And this system of broods and three different species have evolved into 11 and 13 and 17-year cicada broods. And that's prime numbers right there. So it would be hard for any other organism, a predator, let's say, to follow those prime numbers instead of having like every other year. So it's a fascinating system. It's not quite clear how they evolved this way, but this is what those broods look like. This map shows all the different broods, and we have three species emerging in different cycles in different parts of the eastern United States. And so this is a very complex system. You can find out a lot more about this on cicadamania.com. The annual cicada, on the other hand, is here in the Northeast, we have a variety of species. They tend to be greenish, light, dark, brownish, as opposed to the periodical cicadas, which tend to be dark colored and have red eyes and tan kind of wings. So I learned something in the process of making this slide set, and that is that I have seen various species of of annual cicadas. So the one on my hand there is a lyric cicada, and the one on the tree is a swamp cicada. Again, these will emerge each year, but each insect has more than a 1-year life cycle. Now let's get to their predators. I think the most important predator of cicadas is probably birds. However, the most important arthropod predator is a cicada-killer wasp. And these are 2-inch long, as much as 2-inch long, ground nesting solitary wasps that prey on cicadas in order to rear their young. They don't eat the cicadas, but their larvae will. These wasps are most active in mid to late summer. And in North America, we have an eastern cicada killer wasp and a western. And the eastern one is probably the most common that you would see because we have so many cicadas in the eastern half of the United States. The female is typically larger than the male. And you can see the color pattern of our eastern cicada killer wasp. Now, there are some imposters. We get calls all the time about, what is this? What is that? And people will confuse wasps easily. The one on the left, a pigeon tremex, you can see that it has a long, what looks like a stinger. That's actually just an ovipositor. And if you're not familiar, Hymenoptera, the bees, wasps, and ants, when they have a stinger, that's a modified ovipositor. So therefore, males can't sting you. So the pigeon tremex is not something you would find dangerous or anything. You might find it out in your nurseries. The European hornet, and I included the southern yellow jacket queen. Here, those are both social wasps with good stingers and defensive behavior. I include the southern yellow jacket queen, the queen, because she has an orange abdomen and she is big. So that would be something else you might mistake for a cicada killer wasp. And if you had southern yellow jackets, you would be concerned. Now, I threw in this slide because we've heard so much about murder hornets and other scary things like that. The Asian giant hornet, which is what has earned the murder hornet name, is no longer found in the United States. It was a successful eradication program. However, the yellow-legged hornet, Vespa velutina, is currently spreading slowly in the southeast United States around the city of Savannah, Georgia. And both of these are of concern to beekeepers because they prey on bees. They're both large wasps, and they could be confused with a cicada killer wasp. Now talk about the cicada killer wasp life cycle. Look at the size of that, that female cicada killer and her prey. She's a little smaller actually than the prey. Well, the adult wasps emerge in early summer when the cicadas become active. And adults feed on sugars. They really like plant sap. They'll probably get along very well with spotted lanternfly. But they forage for cicadas to feed their young, as I said earlier. So how does she fly with that thing? Well, females have a strategy to get back to their burrow. They climb trees carrying that cicada, and they walk out to sort of a tip of a branch and they glide down. And so they climb up another tree and glide down, and always in the direction of their burrow. So we don't really see cicada killer wasps flying with the cicada because they're pretty heavy for that. Um, so the life cycle of the wasp is like this. The female will excavate a burrow that's 10 to 12 inches below the soil surface, but as much as 3 feet long with several chambers, each with one larva. The female will provision the larvae with either one for a male or two or more for female offspring. And these cicadas are actually stunned. They're not dead. They are stung, they have venom, they're alive, and it's a pretty horrifying thing to think about a cicada being eaten by a larva alive. But that's what happens. The larvae feed, they pupate, and then they emerge the following summer. So cicada killer wasps have a 1 year life cycle and single generation. Cicada wasp habitat, this is where they like to burrow. They like sandy or loose soil with not much vegetation. They like baseball diamonds and athletic fields with low turf quality, which is just about every school in New York State these days. They like golf course sand traps a lot because the soil is perfect for them. They'll, burrow into stone walls when it's a retaining wall with soil behind it, and anytime there's access to soil. So the bottom picture is a little bit low quality, but it demonstrates that, this wasp had access to soil right next to the driveway. So as long as it's, a relatively dry soil and easily excavated, she's happy. Okay. So are cicada killer wasps dangerous? People get terrified when they see them flying around. Well, the females are hard at work. They're digging those burrows. They're hunting for cicadas. They couldn't care less about people. They really have no contact with people. But the males will guard areas where females are nesting and try to mate with them. Sometimes you have many females nesting in one area, and you can have a lot of activity, especially the males chasing each other around in flight, and charging up to you, which really is just them looking at a new object in their environment. A large object just appeared, and trying to reorient around you. Um, let's see. Yeah. So the females aren't social, but they tolerate each other and will nest in good areas where conditions are favorable. And I like to say this is like carpenter bees. It's really a similar strategy. Males guard the females' burrows, and they will fly at each other and they will fly at you. And, they're harmless, those boys. Anyway, so some IPM tips for you if you are dealing with cicada killer wasps. First of all, I preach tolerance because wasps these are amazing creatures. They will only be around for a couple months, 2 months maybe. Let them do their thing. They may be helping, they may be controlling a bad cicada, season. And biodiversity is good. And we all know that insects are in trouble. There are fewer insects today than ever before. But if cicada killer wasps are in your yard every year and you don't like it, there are some things you can do. Cicadas, once the cicadas are buzzing, you want to keep your eye out for cicada killer wasps. And if you have an area where they've, nested in the past, if you flood that area, flood the burrows, or put on sprinklers regularly during the day, during the height of activity, it will make the soil wet and it will make those cicada killers perhaps move on because it wouldn't be great conditions for them. We also recommend covering the soil with mulch or stone or landscape cloth or whatever you can. We want to reduce access to the soil in an area that we're trying to protect. You can overseed bare spots in the lawn. Turf grass doesn't come out of nowhere. You have to overseed to keep a nice lawn. So overseeding bare spots on the lawn, which can be done in August, September if you have good irrigation or rain. It can be done in the spring. But you want to make sure you don't have bare spots in your lawn. And you can use ground cover plants and, planting beds and stuff to cover the soil as well. You just want to create a barrier. And last but not least, you can use a dust formulation of a pyrethrin or a pyrethroid at the nest entrance. This is a very targeted way to use a pesticide against these insects. I don't recommend it, but if it's necessary, that's a good way to do it because the dust won't, just targets the burrow itself. And the wasp, when she grooms, will eat the dust formulation off her body and, become intoxicated. Never pour pesticides down the burrow. Never pour gasoline or any other kind of fuel into the soil. And don't try the soapy water down the burrow. The burrows go sideways, so you may not even reach the chamber where the young are. But soapy water, we can't recommend that because it's off-label. Even soap has an EPA label, and the label is the law. So remember, cicada killer wasps are native, they're beneficial, and I hope that we can tolerate them more. I found this meme on Facebook or something like that. The aggressive wasp you sprayed is actually a mom who will never sting you, and that is true. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks so much, Jody. I certainly learned a lot both about cicadas and cicada killer wasps, and I appreciate you sharing that today. I'm actually doing our IPM Minute today. My name is Amara Dunn-Silver, and I'm the Biocontrol Specialist with Cornell IPM. And today I will be doing the last installment of Feeding Friendly Insects. Today we're covering step 8, which is managing weeds. Managing weeds may not be your favorite part of feeding friendly insects, but it is an important part of growing the flowers that will feed them. What you can see in this picture here is a raised bed, and there are some orange stakes and rows of perennial wildflowers. Nothing's blooming yet, but the plants are there. But the plants are surrounded by weeds, some grasses, some purslane, some other weeds, and we need to take care of those in order for the wildflowers to flourish. In case this is your first time joining us for Feeding Friendly Insects, we are talking about two types of friendly insects: pollinators, like this cute bumblebee you can see on the blue false indigo flower on the right, and also insect natural enemies of pests, like this lacewing larva that you can see on the purple echinacea flower. These larvae eat aphids and lots of other pests. We're mostly focused on thinking about how do we grow flowers that feed them, but also related to growing those flowers is providing shelter and protection to these insects. I have a QR code on this slide, and you'll see it a few other times in the presentation that will take you to a website where you can learn a lot more about creating habitat that feeds friendly insects. Also want to let folks know that our focus in this series has been on not just any flower, but specifically perennial flowers, and especially those that are native to the places where we live. Doesn't mean you can't plant other flowers or whether they are non-native, as long as they're not invasive, or annuals instead of perennials, but our focus here has been on perennials. In 2025, we covered 4 steps related to installation. How do we get the soil ready? How do we choose plants? And then actually getting your plants or seeds in the ground, preferably in the fall. And then this year in 2026, we've talked about some maintenance steps. When should you cut stems? How long should you wait to clean up your garden? How do you recognize those wildflower seedlings once they start coming up in the spring? And then related to that, today we're talking about managing weeds. One of the main reasons you want to be able to recognize the wildflower seedlings that you planted is so that you know what is a weed to pull up and what is a wildflower to leave. So here we are, step 8, managing weeds. Our goal here is to give these perennial wildflowers plenty of space so that they can thrive. Perennial wildflowers take a few years to establish. Sometimes people say first they sleep, then they creep, then they leap. They don't grow nearly as fast as most of our weeds, especially our annual weeds. So we need to keep on top of the weeds so that these flowers have space to grow. There are a variety of options you can use for managing weeds. In the picture on the left, you can see a walk-behind push lawnmower that appears to be mowing a nearly pure stand of ragweed. Ragweed is an annual weed, and if you're establishing perennial wildflowers, a good way to manage the annual weeds in those perennial wildflowers, especially in a larger area, is to mow the weeds regularly. These annual weeds, as long as you mow them before they can produce more seed, you'll get more plants growing from the seeds that are already in the soil. And if you're not putting more seeds in the soil, you will slowly reduce your weed seed bank. The perennial flowers won't be hurt because their growing tips are close to the ground. Just set your mower to its highest setting and they'll be fine. Another option you have for a smaller area would be hand pulling weeds. And I have a picture on the right that shows sort of a before and after. The weeds are going crazy. Pull them out. Not everyone's favorite job. Sometimes it can be a little meditative. And then you've got some space around those wildflowers. Once you've done some hand weeding, I think mulch is a great tool to use to make it easier for you to weed in the future and cut down on the weeding that you have to do. Of course, if you're interested in using herbicides, that is an option. You'd want to use a spot treatment and obviously not spray the whole area. And of course, you would need to read and follow the label on any herbicide you consider using. But again, your goal here is to keep on top of managing those weeds while you're establishing these perennial wildflowers. Establishing perennial wildflowers is not a set it and forget it activity. You want to keep on top of those weeds so you can be successful. And that is all I have for you today. Since this is a recording, we're not doing question and answer time, but you can feel free to email me if you have additional questions, and we'll include some more links in the description of the YouTube recording. Thanks for joining us and hope you have a great weekend.